Hutchie. Everyone in football knows him. And like many of the big names in the media, he polarises opinion. Whatever your view might be, his rapid climb up the corporate ladder is a fact of life. Craig Hutchison, corporate heavyweight. It would have sounded fanciful 5 years ago, wouldn't it?
Probably, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything different to what I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We probably just flew a bit under the radar at those times, and we're just a bit bigger and a bit more comes with that, but it doesn't feel much different to me. I've always tried to find my own way in life, and business is kind of where I've landed over the last decade.
Did you have a net worth of 50 million 5 years ago?
No, and I don't now.
Is that figure not right?
Well, where have you researched? I thought you said you were well researched today.
No, I didn't say that. I said I'd done some research.
Not even remotely close.
Craig, have a look at this. This is you, I think, in your Channel 10 days, correct?
I've aged well, haven't I?
What age were you then?
I was 20, 21 probably. Yeah. 21, I think.
Did you like television, didn't you? You liked television more than the print, didn't you?
I did, but I like radio more than both of them.
Do you really?
Yeah. It's more suited to me, I think, as an on-air guy. Not that I am anymore, but more suited to my persona, I think.
I knew you, firstly. You're a shy kid. I think you were shy. Kid from Warragul. Had a cadetship at the Herald Sun.
Yep.
I'd only been there 12 months and you came on staff. I asked this with some trepidation. Did I look after you?
No, not particularly, but that was more my doing than yours. I was green as grass, came down from Warragul in country Victoria, landed on the door of the Herald Sun. My dream job, I'd been a reader from the age of 6, and Friday mornings were about getting the paper and seeing the teams, and loved all the great names and bylines of my childhood, you know, Tony DeBolfo and Scott Palmer and Peter Simonovic and all those, you know, all those great names. Linda Pearce at the time, I think, for a while. So I loved, and my dream was to work at the Sun or the Herald Sun newspaper. And so when I got there, I was green as grass, didn't understand big business or big places, had never had a job before, was fresh out of school and was overzealous and went pretty hard. And
what does overzealous mean?
I just was crash or crash through, looking back like I was in a real hurry to become a mainstream journalist and to break sports stories, and I smile a lot when I see some of the young crop come through now who have got similar zest and ambition, and I just had no self-awareness at all. I was just determined to get the story on the back page the next day, and for some people, I think editors in particular, I had a couple of advocates who were terrific to me and encouraged that. But there are, in any business, a lot of people who've been around a long time who feel, and particularly in those days, you had to really do your time. You know, cadetship would take 3 years. The fact that I was in a real hurry probably didn't suit everyone, and looking back, I can see that that was a fair and reasonable view of the business, including probably yourself at the time.
Yeah, I can't actually remember, but I knew you because you were a young man in a hurry at the time. So you've packed a bit into 25 years. You worked at the Herald Sun, then you turned to TV and have worked for channels 10,
9 and 7. Yep.
Yeah. Now radio with SEN,
yep.
And you're the boss and the CEO of SEN. You haven't wasted your time, have you?
Well, I've had a lot of things go wrong. Been sacked a couple of times, been suspended.
I like your line. You've been sacked, sued and suspended.
Yeah, they're the big three, aren't they? Not much more.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're starting to become plural. I've been sacked a couple of times. So that's never ideal. But you learn more in those situations than you do if you don't go through them. And I think I always loved the Herald Sun newspaper because those formative years and editors like Phil Gardner and influencers like Tim Cleary, who I met there and still work with to this day, I just learnt so much from the way that paper rolls each day. And I think the great thing about journalism is you go home at night winning or losing every day. And it's a very great thing in business because in business I find not everyone has the same sense of urgency. But in newspapers, that's just how you're taught. At the end of the day, you've either had a good day and someone says well done, or you've had a really bad day and you get your backside kicked the next morning by the sports editor.
But it does exact a heavy toll, doesn't it? Particularly you were a news getter, a reporter. And I mean, it's different to writing opinion stuff because that can come any day of the week and it just stands up and survives for a month. But if you're writing news and you miss it, you're in trouble, aren't you? Yeah,
and I let it define me, you know, I used to think my whole life was whether I broke a story that day or not. And you get so self-obsessed with that. And I did that pretty hard, pretty quickly for maybe 10, 12 years, and I just clearly burnt out at the end of that. I was so lacking any broader focus other than what today's news story was, and that's not healthy.
Some of your critics would say that you were unscrupulous. Is that unfair?
Define that for me.
Well, I mean, I think talking about that you were prepared to sort of pay for people to look out for you and ring you with news tips.
Yeah, that never happened.
It never happened?
No.
There was a famous story about you paying a cafe proprietor to keep his eyes open and ring you if he saw anything of interest, and he allegedly rang you about Dennis Pagan catching up with John Elliott. Not true?
No, that's not true. No.
True.
But I did build networks of people around the place and talk to them as often as I could. I think my only thing I had as a journalist was hard work. Mm-hmm. And so my view was I didn't know as many people or wasn't as well connected, but maybe if I made twice as many calls as everybody else, then I'd be a chance. And so that was how I applied my craft. And I do think that you'd get taught some great skills in the Herald Sun system about the types of people that can find information for you. So that was a brief period of my life, Mike.
That doesn't refresh your memory? Seeing Dennis in a Carlton top?
Yeah, I think we had the story on the Channel 7 News that Dennis Pagan was in a meeting with John Elliott in the city office. I did get tipped off that the meeting was on and got a camera there, and we did get the story off the top of the 6 o'clock news and broke that story. But I think I've been building relationships for a long time around that to make it happen.
Did you pay people? Did you retain people to give you news tips?
Not in the Channel 7 days, no, and never. But I think, certainly at times at the Footy Show, if there was a commercial deal around the story, I wasn't ignorant that was going on or part of it, and I actually don't have any problem with that.
No.
But in a newsroom, in a Channel 7, 9 or 10 newsroom, or in the newspapers, I don't think I've ever spent $1 of mine or someone else's to procure a story.
How hurt were you by your stuff up with Justin Kasitzki?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the background was that you named Kasitzki as a St Kilda player who had been implicated in an alleged rape. Yeah,
I mean, it was my lowest day in journalism. There's no escaping that, and it's one of those things you can never take back. Never take back. And ultimately, I got to know Justin in post-retirement and done some work together and have great respect. And the way he was able to move on from that was extraordinary, and a better man than me or most. But yeah, like to incorrectly name one of the two players in a sexual misconduct investigation was a horrific error. One that probably would have been sackable, I think. I certainly was expecting that I wouldn't have a job the next day and offered as much.
Did you offered to
Yeah,
step down?
I said to Ian Johnson, the managing director at the time, that if he thought that it would be best for me to go, it would be a reasonable decision, and he to his eternal credit backed me in. But it was it's uncomfortable talking about it. I had taken a call the night before that this was happening. It was at a very particularly sensitive time, and it was a shocking allegation, and one that went for 10 years, really. The allegation probably still resonates to this day. And a lot of lives were affected through that. I'd been given those two names. The debate, I guess, was... And then the next morning I went and saw someone who confirmed to me that they were the names. I didn't, however, make enough calls on it. There was a want and wish to get to air and be the first to tell the story. That clearly was a bad decision. I was probably experienced enough to not name either of the players in the story that I broke into news to do. And the debate always is, are you implicating everyone if you don't name someone?
Yes, yeah.
Or did I need to name someone in the first place if I was 98 or 99% sure? My great friend Liam managed Justin, and he had denied it to me moments before I went on air. And
Piggers denied it to you, and you still went with it.
Yeah. But Liam and I have a great friendship, and Liam has never told me a thing about a player he managed, ever. And I would think he's so defensive of his players that he would, if he felt the need, he would mislead me about that. So I didn't trust his denial like I should have, and I wouldn't have begrudged the denial in the first place. So I think it was an error, and a bad one, a really bad one, and an embarrassing one, and one that you can't take back.
Did you jump on a plane with Ben Cousins and follow him to America?
Yep.
How did that come about? Was that your own initiative, or was it the station's?
No, it was mine. I was new at Channel 9. I had got wind of the fact that Ben was going to go overseas with his dad, and I thought I'll absolutely go and cover the story. I booked myself on a plane. It happened to be the same plane that he was on. And
coincidentally?
Yeah, well, ostensibly, I had a fair reasoning that would be the flight, because there's only one a day, and I took my chances. And he was on the plane, and I wore quite a bit of flack for that. Post that, there were media at the front and end of that flight, but I was on the flight, so I kind of wore the can of it. And I think, looking back, I approached his dad and said, look, I'm here, I'm coming over to cover the story. I don't want to get in your way. This is my seat number, somewhere on the plane on the way over. Can you come past and let's have a chat about what's fair and reasonable, or whether I can talk to Ben when we land. He came past my seat, about 5 hours from Los Angeles, Brian Cousins, and said, thanks for the way you've approached it.
Yep.
Ben's not going to talk when we land. He's a little fragile. I'm sure you'll get some pictures through the airport like I'd expect anyone to. But our welfare guy is happy to do an interview with you. Sarge, which was Ian Miller, down at Venice Beach later on this afternoon. So how does that feel like a reasonable trade-off? And I said, no problem. I got the shots of Ben walking through the airport. There were 15, 20 journalists there waiting for him to come through. And so, yeah, I think, in hindsight, as a journalist, it's your job to go and cover the stories that happen. They're not always pleasant ones. Could you argue that he's entitled to go overseas and not be covered? Well, probably. But I think at that point, we're all trying to make sense of what the struggle was. Like, the struggle in hindsight is really clear.
Yep.
But at that time, it was just such a shocking thing, wasn't it? It was such an in the West Coast 2007 era, which coincided when I moved to the Footy Show, it was such an unexpected thing. We were all trying to get our head around the possibility that this drug use was so rife in a club. Like, it had been foreign to all of us, in and out of football at that time. And so, yeah, I think at the time I'd probably have done the same thing again. But I kind of wore the can for it a little bit.
But it would happen matter-of-factly these days, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think in public life, if you sign up for public life, you take what comes with it. And I'm not without sympathy for Ben. I think we all live and pray every day that he can find a way through what he's going through, and I desperately feel for his dad. But I think it would be naive. I think it would be naive of people to think that football wouldn't cover that story. And you could argue that football turned a blind eye to Ben's woes for a fair while before they became mainstream news.
That was about the time you were burnt out, wasn't it? You were cooked.
Yeah, I think probably a year before that, end of 2005 or 6, I'd run my race. I just needed to get overseas and down tools and reset and think about what I was going to do. I didn't feel like I had much more left to give. And so I kind of resigned from everything and went to New York and just tried to figure out a different life for myself. Started the business around that time while I was away.
That was the Croc Media business?
Yep. I'd never really thought that I would get into business, but I wanted to do something different other than journalism, and then kind of got coaxed back into journalism by the lure of the Footy Show and had a 3 or 4 year run there doing it. But, I realistically knew that the best of me was probably past as a journalist.
The Footy Show ended badly for you. You took over as host for 2017 from Jimmy Brayshaw.
Yep.
Didn't last the season. I must say, and I mean this, I think that you handled it as well as anyone possibly could. You didn't, there was no whining and whinging and blaming anyone else. Did it hurt?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, we've all got egos, and it's, a 27, 8, 30-year legacy, transformative television show that we all grew up watching and enjoying, and unbelievably humbling to be on it as a reporter, first of all, from 2007 through 9-10, and then to get a chance to host it. Like, that's boys' own stuff. So to fail at it...
Did you fail?
Yeah, unquestionably, yeah.
Well, so there's the broader view is that the Footy Show was in trouble, and that you sort of took a spot on the Titanic, as it were.
Well, it was buyer beware. So if you sign up for something, you have to have enough faith and confidence in yourself that you can do a good enough job to carry the expectations of people that hire you to do it. And I didn't ultimately meet those expectations. So I can't sit around and blame anyone else for that. Ultimately, if I'd been any good at it, I'd still be doing it.
How heavy were you when the Footy Show people came to you and said they wanted you to do the job if you could present in a slightly healthier fashion?
Yeah, I think I was heavier than would be reasonably expected to host a free-to-air television show. But in fairness, in early December was the last thing that I had on my mind that I would be doing. And I just don't find it naturally easy to lose weight.
in retrospect, what did you think you lacked in that role?
I think probably my style's a bit more observational and casual. I'm not naturally charismatic or a natural showman, and I think that show really needs a dynamic, charismatic presence. And clearly James, Gary and Eddie all have that, don't they, in their psyche? And I probably haven't spent my life wanting to be a free-to-air primetime television host. It's been a little bit accidental for me. So, I probably just didn't have the gravitas to pull it off.
Because that was a variety show, I was just think, because you're still hosting Footy Classified.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your role on Footy Classified. It seems that you're deliberately the Asian provocateur there. You set yourself as the one. You don't care about what the panel or what the public think about some of the things you say.
Yeah, historically that's been my role, and I don't really know why else I would be on it if that weren't my role. It's probably changing a little bit as I'm hosting it on my own.
I think you undersell yourself on that. I watched it recently, and you allowed your panel members to talk about your pre-season ladder, which had West Coast and North Melbourne in the bottom two positions on the ladder. I think we're at risk anyway. We get enough muck thrown at us without exactly inviting our colleagues to throw some more.
But that's true. I did tip Essendon to win the flag.
You need to remind people when you've perhaps been off the mark.
See, I have this really, I will say what I like about you and you can say what you like about me, and let's not hold it against each other. That's my philosophy on media, is be as open as free as you can. So you would say that Asian provocateur, I'm naturally opinionated. I've got an opinion on everything, and that's can, I'm sure, drive people mad at times. But that's television, in my mind, is about, and media is about giving as much of that as you can. And so I encourage, if someone has something to say about me, I'd rather hear it on television than hear it in the production meeting. It's good television. You shouldn't take it personally.
Now, your role at SEN.
Yep.
Been much publicised. You're now CEO of the parent company, correct?
Yep.
Making $944 grand a year.
Well, not quite that much, but...
What, 943?
No, it's...
Well, that were my papers tabled.
Yeah, no, my earnings capacity are that based upon performance, and that's publicly listed, and that is inclusive of what I earn on and off air on all of my roles. So it's not. I haven't got two.
So it's off the bench is included in there.
Yeah, everything.
And your role as a businessman.
And it's, it's no different to what I was earning the day before I began and took over the network. It's the same amount. It's just made public.
You've made some big decisions in the chair. 3 of them I want to talk to you about.
Yep.
Dumping David Schwartz and Mark Allen.
Yep.
And Mark Robinson.
Yep.
Now, Schwartz and you were great mates, and I think you had at one point had a good, healthy relationship with Robbo, and I suspect you got on well with Mark Allen.
Yep.
Why did you not tell them that they were to be discarded?
The circumstances of all 3 were different and individual, but I can talk to them all if it suits. With David and Mark, they had expiring deals under the previous regime. We were legally restricted and didn't in fact take hold of the business as a management team officially in the public markets until April the 1st. We had an ability to influence decisions beforehand, which is rare, I'm told, in public company mergers or such situations. And so before Christmas, at least, and probably not till early mid-January, I just wasn't allowed to talk to talent directly who were otherwise employees of Pacific Star Network. So,
wasn't allowed by whom?
I wasn't allowed to sit there and negotiate their deals or to recast them.
But you were allowed to make the decision.
But I was allowed to influence and make the decisions. Yeah. So I just wanted to go in a different way. And the business, the 11/16 SEN platform, has been fantastic for a long period of time. People love it. Everyone's got a strong opinion on it. I think it's got a really unique and rich part of Melbourne's sporting culture. And I love all of the great things that the management have done before we came along. But as happens in life, when you get an opportunity to do something differently, you want to put your own stamp on it. I have great respect for Mark and David, and I wish them every bit of luck in their new...
You say that, and you're good with the platitudes, but you say you have great respect for David and Mark.
Yep.
You live with David. You punted with David. He was a very close friend of yours.
I never lived with him, but we were mates.
Did you not spend some time under his roof?
No, but we kicked around quite a bit in our young 20s and got along well and lost contact over the years. But there's nothing personal about it.
But wasn't he entitled to hear from you particularly when they were led to believe,
Yep.
Schwartz and Allen were led to believe that there was a 2-year contract on the table.
Yeah, with David, he didn't work for me. It's not like I asked David to stop doing something he'd ever done for us before.
But you
Yeah.
drove the decision
did.
to remove him from the afternoon
But because
show.
of the circumstances of his dealings with management at the time and the fact that it was pre-Christmas, the legality stated that they had to deal with that with the current management at the time. So if I would have had no problem if it had been 2 months later, looking him in the eye and telling him that we're going in a different direction. And it's happened to me. I've been on the end of it before. I understand why people take it personally, but it's never personal.
Are they suing you for $1 million?
There was an early suggestion that they were. I'm not sure whether that will continue or not.
The Robinson one intrigues me
Yeah.
too. He's a high profile. He's got the highest profile job
Yeah.
in sport in Victoria.
Yeah.
And I mean, he, like you, can polarise opinion.
Yeah.
But he's a big name and he's aggressive. Was it personal in Robbo's case that you removed him?
No, not one bit.
But you and he don't get on, do you?
No, I'm fine. Yeah.
You bag him on Saturday mornings.
No, see, there's a perception around this. He and Liam, who I work with,
Liam Pickering?
don't get along, and
Yeah.
that's clear. And so Liam can poke the bear a little bit and make fun at Robbo's expense from time to time, and I don't really think it's my role to get in the middle of that. But I respect him and like him, and he's one of those people who was really good to me.
So you didn't think it was working with Robbo on SEN?
No, I think we would have had a role for Robbo this year on the station. I probably could have handled it better at the time. He was going away the next day. He was dealing with the then general manager of the station, and we had really yet to take over, albeit we were, to your point, making the calls and influencing things in sort of, I think it was January of this year maybe. And he wanted an answer before he left on whether he was doing Crunch Time, which is the show that he's had a great influence on.
It's interesting, though, that you weren't able to have face-to-face conversations with Schwartz, Allen and Robinson.
Yeah.
Yet you were with Gerard Whateley,
Yeah.
the big fish you landed. Whose idea was it to go after him, and how did you convince him to leave the government broadcaster?
Well, first of all, he's everything I thought he would be and more as a broadcaster. We'd clearly lost a bit of contact over the years, but I had...
You fell out with him, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a good friendship early, and we kind of hit a fork in the road with that over a story early days, and then when
What over who should write it?
No, we were competing at 7 versus 10
Oh, okay.
head-to-head on the road, and
Yeah,
as things happen, you get a little bit robust and compete. But I'd never lost respect for him, and had been a listener and a watcher of 360 here at Fox. And so the opportunity, I thought he would be perfect for what we're trying to achieve, which is broaden the church, trying to attract a different style and tone of listener, while at the same time keep the listeners we've got, replenished and happy with the environment, and to do sport a little differently to what it had been done. He has always been ambitious and has breathtakingly great talent, and it was probably a bit of a pipe dream to see if he were available. When I learnt that there was an expiring contract, I thought we have to make this happen. We have to find a way.
What was the story that set you and Gerard at odds?
There was a misunderstanding over a story involving Lee Colbert quitting Geelong. He had fled the country that morning, and he had gone to Melbourne Airport the day after I'd done the story on Live and Kicking that he was about to quit the Cats as captain. It was a very delicate time for the Cats. I had interviewed him at the airport that morning, and then Gerard arrived after I had interviewed him, and I, in essence, pretended that I hadn't interviewed him for 2 or 3 hours to make sure that he got through the Sydney airport and on the way to LA so that he was unobtainable. And yeah, we had a difference of view of the circumstances surrounding that, and would have a laugh about it these days.
What's your fascination with the States? You, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you tend to sort of leave Melbourne as soon as the footy season's over, and New York becomes your base.
Yeah. Well, historically it did. It's a bit harder now. It's almost impossible. But yeah, I've loved New York and the States and LA and its influence on me. I feel like that city picked me up at a time when I was broken and uncertain as to what the future held. And just the sense and vibe and purpose and great will and the way people help each other. It's a wonderful place.
Fact or fiction? You converted the kitchen into a studio because you couldn't cook and you wouldn't cook.
Fact.
Fact.
Yeah. So got for 10 years had a small kitchen, which I never cooked from, and a radio studio that sat in the kitchen. And I think the worst thing that happened to me one day was about 10:15 on a Saturday morning when I could smell gas in the house and turned around and it accidentally leant on the stove and the place was about to go up in flames.
Really?
Yeah.
You were almost exclusively dressed in suits when we see you in public. Do you have an outlet? I mean, do you let down occasionally? And what if you have a hobby? What is it?
Travelling to the States, and my partner Claire has got a young boy who plays footy on Sunday mornings, and that's become a pretty favourite part of my week too.
You live in a hotel, don't you?
Yes.
Seems unusual that you've got a house in the city,
Yep.
and you prefer to live in a hotel.
Yeah, I think it's probably spoken to the amount of travel I've done in the last 2, 3, 5 years. We've got an office in every city now in Australia, in Adelaide, Sydney, Brisbane and Perth.
Yep.
And trying to be more trans in and around those offices and support those has been a focus. And I haven't and don't spend much or any time at home, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to have, you know, a home infrastructure when I don't really need one.
Have you whacked up a spag bowl or anything?
No, well, there's a kitchen in the hotel, Mike. But yeah, it's been wonderful. The Olsen Hotel.
I spoke to your father Ken.
Yep.
This week.
That'd have been a riveting conversation.
No, it was a good chat.
Yep.
He, the older we get, the more conservative we get.
Yep.
He says he wishes you were still at the Herald Sun. He's worried about your capacity to pay 160 people a week.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that phone call at the time. So it'd been my life wish to work at the Herald Sun, as I told you earlier in the interview. And so then sort of before the cadetship had finished, to call him and say I was leaving to go and produce a breakfast radio show on 927.
With Kevin Bartlett and Dr. Turf.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, no, that doesn't sound like it's something you should do. I'm worried about that. And that's just a dad looking out for his boy, right?
Yeah. He said he doesn't see much of you, but you're very generous.
Yeah, I'd like to see more of him. And obviously him being in Warragul and me being in Melbourne, I should make more effort to see him. He's a beautiful man.
He talked about you as a young sportsman. I asked him about that. He said your skills were good, and I saw you one night in the E.J. Whitten game. You can clearly handle the footy once it's in your hands. He said you weren't all that quick. In fact, his description was you were slower than a wet hen.
Yep. Slow and scared and lacking athleticism, I think, would be the things that spring to mind, Mike.
The slowness part, we talked about it in the cricket. You were pretty keen on cricket.
Yep.
He reckons you were fielding in the outfield one day in a game at Warragul. Some bloke hit it and you had about a 40-metre run for it. And you waddled off afterwards and a bloke leaned over the fence and said, Hutchie, they've run 8.
Yeah. I think that might... There's some semblance of truth in that, although I don't think they ran 8. And I was left with the nickname Pillar back in Warragul from there, which is I move like a pillar.
Yeah. Hutchie, I appreciate your honesty. You've made a big impression on the footy landscape, and that's going to become bigger and bigger by the year. Good luck in the business ventures, and great to see you.
Michael, thanks for having me. Love the new glasses and well researched.